It is my very distinct pleasure to bring our esteemed mayor, Ed Malloy, up to talk about our progress in town. This was based on a talk that he gave at the economic... Where did you give this talk initially?
Iowa Environmental Council.
That's right, Iowa Environmental Council. So, without further ado, Mayor Ed Malloy.
Thank you, Bob. It is wonderful being in this building, and Stuart, I want to go back just a little bit further on the sweat and the money part of this great accomplishment here. You know, back in 2002, right after I had taken office as mayor, the first thing that I did was put together a citizen commission to do a 10-year strategic plan for Fairfield. And there were 24 people who came together, and we basically took a year's time to vet out all of the different directions with specifics, ideas, goals, benchmarked, that we would begin to change the culture and the dynamic of Fairfield and draw out more of its innate creativity and a lot of the directions that people really wanted to go. So there was a strong impulse, for instance, to go in the direction of arts and culture, being a tourism-based community as well. And one of the things that came up during that discussion was it was in the area of sustainable living. And it was one of those points where not everyone on the commission could identify or relate to those principles of sustainable living and environmental ethics and those kinds of things, putting those first within the community. So they weren't really ready to sign off on specific projects, but they said we should have something in there. So what we settled on was to become a center for education and best practices. And that was, again, in 2002. In 2006, we had an opportunity to apply for a program, which was a designation and a grant-based program called Iowa Great Places. How many remember Iowa Great Places? So essentially, what the governor at the time, Governor Vilsack, was looking for was a way to support and stimulate those communities that were aspirational enough to change the dynamic of rural Iowa. And you were going to be rewarded for your ideas and for how you were going to organize them and what you were going to put forward. So Fairfield put together a very robust application, and at the heart of that was an educational center for sustainable living. There were 132 cities that applied for this. There were 12 finalists, and 6 were going to be chosen in that year. The committee that did the judging for that, they visited all of the communities, and when they came to Fairfield, we had so many things in our application and so many things to show them that we knew we couldn't get it done. And each community had 90 minutes basically to showcase what it is they were going to do. That was going to be a very big challenge for us. So we went to Hawthorne Direct, a very professional TV production studio, and we said, could you help us make a video? So we did that in 3 weeks' time, and we put together something that was so reflective of all of the diversity in this community and so powerful that we were easily accepted within that first year. And one of the benefits of it was that we received a little over $500,000 in grant funds from the Great Places. We leveraged that into another $1.5 million in grants, but $160,000 of that went to this building. So there was no other city in Iowa that had proposed anything like this, and those people involved with the program really had high hopes for what this could do and what this could bring to the state of Iowa. So its revival is, Bob, deeply, deeply appreciated. I know that from within the community we haven't slowed down. There are a lot of initiatives that have continued to grow and many, many accomplishments. And I want to go through some slides in a minute to remind people of some of the things that we have done here so that you can all kind of take stock and pride in everything that you have imprinted on this community, because it is based on that. It is based on demonstration. It is based on what it is that you do and what you commit to. And this is a community that walks its walk. So, before I go to that, I know it was a kind of a daytime event, and we did, but many of you probably saw this poster around about our water quality conference that took place about 4 weeks ago. And this was something that I really felt very strongly about pulling together, because at the end of the last legislative session, the Iowa legislature was discussing a way to fund water quality initiatives within the state and really tackle the challenge of 750 impaired waterways in the state. And this is a number that's been growing almost exponentially over the last decade, and it's not really getting any better. There's a whole lot of history and statistics to how that all takes place, and it's all fascinating and alarming at the same time, and we're not going to go into those. But we, when I looked at the dialogue, the narrative around the issue at the end of the last legislative session, I didn't feel that there was a compelling enough logic behind, putting as many resources and as much money as we can towards this issue across the state, because it lacked some unifying principle. And what I realized is that it's about our rural economy. And if our environment is so degraded and degraded to the point where people will no longer want to live in rural Iowa or in rural America, then we are failing our children and our grandchildren's generation in terms of having a viable economic opportunity to live in a community where there is a high quality of life. There's a lot of lip service that's given to that. There are a lot of things that people know need to be in place for that. Fairfield, fortunately, has been living that reality for a long time. 73 Iowa counties of the 99 lost population since 2010. Jefferson County has grown by 7.4% in population. This is a place that is desirable to live, and I think that is our message going forward. That's why this environmental piece, this piece of clean water, has to be tied to livable communities, to the economic opportunities that will come in the future. So at our conference, we were very fortunate to have experts in water quality, soil and soil retention, economic development as it is tied to rural communities, and then also the funding mechanisms that are on the table. Diane, I'm so glad to hear that one of the outcomes is a bill that can be presented. Today, I was in Des Moines with several former legislators, environmental lawyers, representatives of environmental organizations, many of whom were at our conference, and our follow-up was to provide not necessarily just a written bill, but a big view, a vision of the specific areas that have to be addressed in this, and that will also go. So I think that the more information that we provide to the leaders, to the legislative leaders going into this session, the more likely we are to have a good bill come out of this. So, yes.
I just wanted to say that I really think that that conference was one of the best conferences that I've gone to. Ed really did an amazing job organizing it. And I wanted to ask you whether the recordings are going to be available so that people could...
Yeah. John Eichert, we've all heard John speak at JFAN annual meetings, and he's a very powerful and an incredible speaker. And I asked John to be our keynote speaker at this, and I challenged him to really connect his ideas to this livable communities concept, because I know where he naturally wants to go when he gets the microphone, which is always wonderful. But he gave an incredible talk at the conference, and the panelists were amazing, and it was a high energy day all the way through, all the way to the very end, which is, I think, indicative of your comment. Unfortunately, the one thing that didn't go well that day was the audio. So even for John's talk, I mean, I thought if we could have brought anything out of it, it would have been great, but that trouble we were having with the microphone that was at that podium for the speakers was not picking up, so it was really broken. So unfortunately, we don't. When we do the next one, we'll have better audio. Okay. So I was very honored to be asked to be a plenary speaker for the Iowa Environmental Council's annual meeting back in October, and their theme for this year was local public-private partnerships in the area of environment that are successful. Again, why? Because this is how we're going to get this accomplished at a grassroots level, and what are the things that are working across the state that we can point to. So what I did was, and I'm going to go through these very fast. This was a 35-40 minute presentation, and I'm going to run through it because the speaker behind me is somebody who is on the ground making this happen, is somebody that I really admire and look forward to his talk. So let's go through these pretty quickly. So Fairfield, Iowa, in 2008, we started a process. Let's connect back to 2002, when we had a little reluctance to fully embrace sustainability as a community in a very specific, descript way. 2008, we're heading into the major recession. Energy prices are at an all-time high. This is the time to introduce the concept. We had been meeting in Bob's kitchen, or dining room table, for about a year, discussing how to start to implement some of the practices within the community, how to shift and change that culture and get people to pay attention. But we had, by this time also, we had 6 years of wonderful accomplishments from our first strategic plan, and I think people saw the value of that planning and visioning process and how it produced results. So going into a second plan around sustainability, I used the logic of, the economic benefits to the community and the city, and we got all of the players involved. We got the school district and the manufacturers and bankers and small businesses, and we had the godfather of sustainability, Lonnie Gamble, and then we also had Troy Van Beek, our next speaker, and I hope Troy will give a little credit to this being somewhat of the genesis of his inspiration to move forward. But in that time, we produced something that was really taking place around the country, but not in as many places as you would think. And I mention that because in 2009, before we published, there was a reporter with MSN.com who was doing a story on what cities across the country were doing. And they had gotten wind about Fairfield doing a strategic plan. I sent them a draft of the plan at the time. He said, "This is great, we'll include it in our article." He never said anything about mayors. He just said it was going to be about cities. So 2 days before he published, he said, "Send me a picture of yourself doing something green. Don't send a headshot." I didn't have anything. So anyway, just thinking, I don't really care whether he uses the picture or not. 2007, when Barack Obama was here on July 3rd on the square, I got a chance to meet him. And in about the 3 minutes that I had, I ran through the list of all of the things that Fairfield was engaged in. I must have touched on sustainable communities, so I sent him that. And I said, here is a picture of myself having a conversation with the president regarding sustainable communities. And he used it. But it was great. So, the 15 greatest mayors in America, what was fascinating about it too was Mayor of San Francisco, Daley of Chicago, Bloomberg of New York, Miami, Atlanta, all of these large cities. And there were two small cities, Fairfield and Greenburgh, Kansas. But we were, you know, I was with the president, so that was... Solar, incredible story. As part of the presentation that I made was to essentially say, you know, prior to 2008, we had, you know, very limited amount of distributed solar, and actually not a lot of it was in Fairfield. A lot of it was out here on some of the rural settings where people were building homesteads. But we really coalesced around this, and one of the principles of our plan was to, again, demonstrate sustainability. So the more people saw solar panels on homes, on commercial buildings, on banks, Troy will talk about that, the more we started to see. So it's right now, it's really incredible. I can't wait to hear the latest statistics. The Sustainable Living Center on campus, you all know about the building, you know about the university's program. Again, this was something that the folks that we were presenting to were very fascinated with in terms of, you know, the educational components of this, because there are many small colleges around Iowa that have some sustainability programs, but nothing that is basically, again, demonstrated and living within a building that represents all of that. Regenerative agriculture, obviously very exciting in terms of what is coming up and what the possibilities are for solving some of our environmental problems, but also showing and again demonstrating another way to farm that is profitable and at the same time respecting that relationship to nature. So terrific start for that program in this first year. Abundance Eco Village, you love to tell this story. You know, obviously, there are so many people, so many political leaders and people who've been through Fairfield, and they've only seen a couple of things, but this is absolutely one of the stops. It is just completely fascinating to people to see this, and I think, Bob, what you're planning to do out in front here will really add to its curb appeal. So looking forward to that. The Seed Center, obviously we talked about that as well. One of the first initiatives that we took on in 2011 was with Alliant Energy. They had a program called Hometown Rewards, and it was an 18-month program where they would essentially come in with their engineering expertise and a few dollars, and they would help us organize conservation practices around the entire community with a goal of reducing our overall energy consumption. So I remember we went into this planning initially, and when we came to the point where we were going to set our goal, we said we want to reduce by 6%. And they just said, no, I don't think that's a realistic goal. Let's go with 4%, and if we overachieve, then great. Okay, so we went through the program, and again, we had manufacturers involved. We had school buildings involved. We did all of the city buildings. We had 200 homes that went through energy audits and were weatherized and retrofitted. There was activity going on all over town, and this was all being measured. And at the end of 18 months, we reduced it by 8.5%. So we doubled our goal, And what we found out on the day that, that this was announced was that we were the first and only city in Alliance territory who had ever completed the program. So there were 5 other cities that had signed up and had gone through the process and set their goals. They never got to them. So we not only did it within a timely period, but we outperformed our own goal. Yes. You know, one of the overall goal statements for our sustainability plan was to change the culture, and this was a great energy project was such a great example, because I remember going into the Pence school, grade school, first through 6th grade, and having an assembly in the gymnasium with all of the kids and describing what it was they were going to do and how they would play a role, and turning off lights and closing doors, and reminding, you know, just watching the measurement of the energy savings. And it was just so fascinating, because at the end of it, when they'd made it, they were promised a pizza party. So we went to their pizza party, and we started a Go Green cheer. So, go green, go green. Whole audience of kids just screaming this. It's just something that they're going to remember. There's a seed there that's planted that they are tied to and connected to, that's going to influence their lives going forward. You know, many years ago, we had a really incredible stormwater demonstration project that's done in our industrial park that covers, I think, 28,000 acres. And it was, you know, again, a good partnership between the Economic Development Association, the Soil and Water Conservation District, the Jefferson County Conservation Board, a number of organizations that came together to do a model project. And if half of you have not seen this, down by Chapel Studios in the industrial park, if you've not seen it, take a drive down there. You will park right here in the permeable paved parking lot, and there are trails that go around the stormwater retention ponds, and there are signage telling you what is in place there as a filtering mechanism for all of that stormwater runoff that's coming from there. The other thing that we have done is we have mapped out Crow Creek watershed. You know what's significant about this? Every watershed in the state is mapped out. There is expertise online right now that knows where all the hot spots are in every watershed in the state. So with the proper funding and with the proper cooperation of the landowners, we can turn this around very, very quickly. All the information was there, and it was fascinating to hear that and learn it at our conference as well. So we are prepared, and I would love to see some local initiatives directed towards this. So, yes, good. So let's talk about that. In the middle school, did a nice rain garden project, and again, this was also part of the Hometown Rewards Alliant project. Came out very nice. Wetlands have been constructed as part of our trail system. The trail system was, you know, an incredible partnership also, as many of you know. 16 miles, it's about a $3.7 million project. There were easements, there were donations. The Department of Transportation actually purchased 7.5 miles of the trail for us as part of their, and gave us an easement as part of their purchase for the bypass. We were doing that at just the right time so that we could take advantage of that. And during also, one of the things that came out of our strategic plan also at the time, I think we were published in 2009. In 2010, Governor Chet Culver came into office one of the things that he instituted was what he called the Iowa Power Fund, and this was going to support local projects that would increase green energy and also sustainable living. So we had applied for a grant. We won a grant. One of the things that we did with it is partially fund the salary of a sustainability coordinator. So Scott Tim, who many of you know, was here with us for about 6 years, I think, and was just a great asset to the community. One of the things that he organized with Trees Forever was the planting of an urban orchard, 160 fruit trees in Chautauqua Park. Those are all. We have planting that's taking place right now on the north side. This is by the Trail Bridge and across the street from campus. Green America, there they are. Okay. Some of our volunteers are here. They continue to, just in their very silent, focused, and dynamic way, continue to chip away at more and more of the great things that we can do in this community. Here are some strategic volunteers. Actually, see, if I had that picture 7 or 8 years ago, that would have gone in instead of the Obama picture. Maybe not. We had talked about our loop trail. The Masden Barns was another great public-private partnership and historic asset. Our water assets remind us that, even here, clean water is something that we want to be vigilant about for our recreational use. Our local food infrastructure is amazing. And again, it's, I think, at a very, very high level as compared with many other communities around the state. It's not just a farmer's market. And a lot of the work that we did through the Blue Zones Initiative and a number of the ongoing efforts that are going now have really moved this into the institutional realms of our community so that there is, high quality food. When we talk about the cost of healthcare and obesity and those problems that seem to be intractable, these are the solutions at the local level. All right, so I've ended up with our, again, I was giving this as at a statewide conference, and I told them about our rebranding effort that ended up with a tagline, "Tune into our vibe." And on that note, they were so excited by what they had learned during the presentation that there will be 2 busloads of people from those organizations will be coming to Fairfield in the spring. So get this place ready.
All right.
And thank you so much for the opportunity to give you a little bit of an update tonight, and we look forward to our next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.